May 22, 1943. 700 miles east of Newfoundland, the North Atlantic churns beneath a grey morning sky. Aboard the escort carrier USS Bogue, Lieutenant Junior Grade William Chamberlain sits in the cramped cockpit of his Grumman Avenger torpedo bomber, scanning the endless waves below. The aircraft's designation is painted on its fuselage, T-11. In 8 minutes, this plane will drop depth charges that will send a German U-boat to the bottom. In 8 minutes, everything the German submarine command thought they understood about safe operating distances will begin to unravel. But what Chamberlain doesn't know, what nobody in the Atlantic Fleet yet understands, is that the ship beneath him, this converted merchant vessel that sailors mockingly call combustible, vulnerable, and expendable, is about to revolutionize submarine warfare. The USS Bogue is not a proper warship by any traditional definition. Her hull was built to carry grain, not aircraft. Her steel is thin enough that crews joke the first torpedo will go through her, and the second will go over her. She pitches and rolls so violently in Atlantic storms that aircraft break loose from their tie-downs and crash into each other. Her maximum speed is barely 18 knots, slower than many merchant ships she's supposed to protect. She is, by every conventional naval standard, inadequate. And yet, over the next 18 months, this ugly boat and her sister ships will sink more U-boats than all the Navy's sleek destroyers and powerful cruisers combined. The transformation won't happen through superior firepower or advanced armor. It will happen because someone figured out how to put aircraft where submarines thought they were safe. In the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, hundreds of miles from any shoreline, in the one place German U-boat captains believed they could surface to recharge batteries without fear of attack. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The story of how merchant ships became submarine killers begins not with military genius, but with desperation. In March 1943, Admiral Karl Dönitz commanded over 400 operational U-boats. His wolf packs are destroying Allied merchant shipping faster than American and British shipyards can replace it. In the first 20 days of March alone, 97 Allied merchant ships went to the bottom. Over 500,000 tons of steel, fuel, and food meant for Britain vanished beneath the waves. Britain has perhaps 3 months of food reserves remaining. The mathematics are brutally simple. If current loss rates continue, Britain will starve before America can build enough ships to sustain her. The U-boats are winning because they operate in a sanctuary the Allies cannot touch. British and Canadian escort vessels, destroyers and corvettes guard the convoys, admirably, but they're shackled to the merchant ships they protect. They cannot pursue contacts beyond visual range without abandoning the convoy to further attack. Shore-based aircraft from Newfoundland, Iceland and Scotland provide air cover at each end of the transatlantic route, but their range is limited. Even the long-range Liberator bombers can only patrol 600 miles from shore before fuel reserves force them to turn back. This leaves a gap in the middle of the Atlantic, roughly 900 miles wide, where no land-based aircraft can reach. The Germans call it the Black Hole. Allied sailors call it Torpedo Junction. U-boat captains call it the Happy Time. In this vast expanse of empty ocean, submarines surface with impunity. They run their diesel engines to recharge batteries. They plot intercept courses for approaching convoys. They communicate with headquarters via radio, reporting positions and requesting orders. They do all of this in daylight, on the surface, confident that no Allied aircraft can reach them. The solution seems obvious in hindsight. Put aircraft carriers with the convoys, extend air cover across the entire Atlantic. But in early 1943, this solution appeared impossible. The United States Navy possesses exactly 7 fleet carriers: Essex, Yorktown, Intrepid, Hornet, Wasp, Enterprise, and Lexington. Every one of them is desperately needed in the Pacific, where they're the only weapons capable of projecting American power across the vast distances between island chains. These carriers are enormous vessels, displacing 33,000 tons, carrying 90 aircraft, steaming at 33 knots. They cost $70 million each to build, require crews of over 3,000 men, and take 3 years to construct. The Navy cannot spare a single fleet carrier for Atlantic convoy duty. The tonnage war will be lost long before enough fleet carriers can be built to cover convoy routes. Admiral Ernest King, Chief of Naval Operations, is not known for creative thinking. He is known for being difficult, abrasive, and utterly conventional in his tactical doctrine. But in 1941, even King recognizes that desperate times require desperate measures. President Franklin Roosevelt, who served as Assistant Secretary of the Navy during World War I, understands maritime logistics in ways most presidents never grasp. He personally orders King to investigate converting merchant ships into auxiliary aircraft carriers. The Navy's initial response is skeptical, bordering on hostile. Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox argues that advances in aircraft technology have made small carriers impractical. Modern combat aircraft are too heavy to operate from short flight decks. The catapults needed to launch them don't exist. The arresting gear to stop them would be too complex for a converted merchant hull. Knox recommends abandoning the entire concept. Roosevelt overrules him. The president doesn't need perfect carriers. He needs something that can put aircraft over convoys in the black hole. Perfect can wait until after Britain is saved or lost. The Maritime Commission identifies 2 diesel-powered C-3 cargo ships under construction, Mormac and Mormacland. Standard merchant vessels designed to haul freight at 14 knots. Their hulls are boxy, utilitarian, optimized for cargo volume rather than hydrodynamics. They have all the grace and beauty of floating warehouses. The Navy took possession of both vessels in January 1941. Mormac goes to Newport News Shipbuilding for conversion. The transformation is brutal in its simplicity. Workers cut away the superstructure, the cargo holds, everything above the main deck. They weld a flat flight deck over the gutted hull, 477 feet long, 80 feet wide. Barely adequate. A fleet carrier's flight deck stretches 800 feet. They install 2 elevators to move aircraft, between the hangar deck and flight deck, 1 forward, 1 aft. Each elevator is a potential point of catastrophic failure if a bomb or torpedo hits it. No armored protection, just open shafts. They add a tiny island superstructure on the starboard side. It houses the bridge, air operations control, and not much else. Everything is cramped, minimal, barely sufficient. Defensive armament consists of 2 5-inch guns and a handful of 40mm and 20mm anti-aircraft weapons. These guns exist not to fight surface ships, but to defend against air attack. The carrier has no armor belt, no torpedo bulges, no compartmentalization designed to contain flooding. A single torpedo hit in the wrong location will sink her. The conversion costs $1.5 million. A pittance compared to fleet carrier construction. On June 2, 1941, 6 months before Pearl Harbor, the Navy commissions her as USS Long Island, CVE-1. CVE stands for escort carrier, but crews immediately reinterpret the designation: combustible, vulnerable, expendable. The name sticks because it's accurate. Long Island is everything a proper warship is not. But she floats. She moves. And most importantly, she carries aircraft. 21 aircraft in theory, though operational experience quickly reveals that number is optimistic. Long Island never sees combat in the Atlantic. The Navy uses her to train pilots, to ferry aircraft across the Pacific, to test the fundamental concept of whether aircraft operations are even possible from such a small, unstable platform. The answer turns out to be yes, barely. Pilots learn to approach at precisely the right speed and altitude. Deck crews develop procedures to secure aircraft against the carrier's violent rolling. Engineers figure out how to maintain engines and airframes in the cramped hangar deck. By late 1942, enough lessons had been learned that the Navy ordered mass production. Not of perfect carriers, but of good enough carriers. The Bogue class represents the second generation of escort carrier design. 25 ships ordered under emergency wartime contracts. 11 were allocated to the British Royal Navy under Lend-Lease. 14 remain for the United States Navy. Construction disperses across multiple shipyards to accelerate delivery. Seattle-Tacoma Shipbuilding in Tacoma, Washington, receives contracts for several hulls. Western Pipe and Steel in San Francisco gets others. The building process begins with Maritime Commission C3 freighter hulls, already under construction or recently completed. These ships were designed to haul 10,000 tons of cargo at 15 knots with diesel engines. Good civilian specifications. Terrible warship characteristics. But they're available, and availability matters more than optimal design. The conversion process follows Long Island's template but incorporates improvements. Slightly longer flight decks, better elevator machinery, enhanced electrical systems to power catapults and arresting gear, improved ventilation in the hangar deck because aviation gasoline fumes in enclosed spaces equal catastrophic explosions waiting to happen. Each carrier receives 2 steam boilers instead of diesel engines. Steam turbines generate 9,000 horsepower, enough to push the 11,000-ton hull to 19 knots in calm seas. In North Atlantic storms, the actual speed drops to 12 or 14 knots as the flat-bottomed hull pounds through waves that would barely register on a proper warship's displacement hull. The Bogue-class carriers are marvels of pragmatic engineering and compromises. Everything about their design prioritizes rapid construction and maximum aircraft capacity over survivability or seaworthiness. The theory is simple. These ships will operate in convoy escort roles, where friendly destroyers and destroyer escorts provide anti-submarine and anti-aircraft screening. The carriers just need to survive long enough to launch and recover their aircraft. If U-boats attack, the escorts will handle them. If enemy aircraft appear, the escort's anti-aircraft fire, combined with the carrier's own fighters, will drive them off. The theory sounds reasonable in planning conferences. Reality in the North Atlantic proves considerably more complex. USS Bogue, CVE-9, is the lead ship of her class. Originally designated AVG-9, Aircraft Escort Vessel, she's reclassified to ACV-9 in August 1942, then to CVE-9 in July 1943. The changing designations reflect the Navy's uncertainty about what these ships actually are. Escort vessels, auxiliary carriers, something entirely new that existing classification systems don't accommodate. Bogue was laid down on October 1, 1941, as Steel Advocate, Hull 170, under Maritime Commission contract at Seattle-Tacoma Shipbuilding. She launches on January 15, 1942. The Navy transfers her on May 1st and commissions her on September 26th, with Captain Giles Short commanding. Short is a 1918 graduate of the Naval Academy, conventional in training, skeptical about the escort carrier concept. He will later command the fleet carrier USS Intrepid, but in 1942 he views Bogue as a temporary assignment, a stepping stone to a real carrier command. After shakedown training in San Diego, Bogue transits the Panama Canal and arrives at Norfolk, Virginia, in early December 1942. Atlantic Fleet assigned her to Task Group 21.12, the Navy's first dedicated anti-submarine hunter-killer group. The concept is revolutionary and largely untested. Previous anti-submarine operations focused on defending convoys. Destroyers and corvettes would screen merchant ships, attacking any U-boat foolish enough to approach within detection range. This defensive posture meant submarines retained the initiative. They chose when to attack, when to withdraw, when to surface safely beyond escort detection range. Hunter-killer groups invert the relationship. Instead of waiting for U-boats to attack convoys, the hunter-killers search for submarines proactively. The escort carrier provides air cover across hundreds of square miles. Her aircraft hunt for surfaced U-boats, force them to dive, track them with sonar buoys, and attack with depth charges and torpedoes. Destroyers screen the carrier and prosecute any submarine contacts the aircraft locate. The hunter-killer group operates independently of convoys, freed from the constraint of maintaining station around slow merchant ships. They can pursue contacts aggressively, coordinate multi-ship attacks, maintain pressure on submarines for hours or even days. But in December 1942, these tactics exist only in planning documents. Bogue's crew must figure out through trial, error, and occasionally fatal mistakes whether the concept actually works in the brutal reality of North Atlantic submarine warfare. The ship's physical characteristics present immediate challenges that no amount of theoretical planning anticipated. Bogue displaces 11,000 tons fully loaded. Her flight deck is 495 feet, 8 inches long, and 111 feet, 6 inches wide. 2 elevators, forward and aft, each measuring 42 feet by 34 feet. The forward elevator is troublesome from the beginning. Spray washes over it in heavy seas, corroding the machinery, jamming the mechanism. Deck crews learn to secure it in the down position during storms, sacrificing operational flexibility for mechanical reliability. The hangar deck, located beneath the flight deck, provides storage and maintenance space for aircraft. It measures 390 feet long, 62 feet wide, with 17 feet, 6 inches of overhead clearance, cramped by any standard. Aircraft must be carefully positioned to maximize storage efficiency. Wings fold on Grumman Wildcats and Avengers to save space. Even so, the theoretical capacity of 30 aircraft proves optimistic. Operational experience reveals that 20 to 24 aircraft is realistic, given space requirements for maintenance, spare parts storage, and crew workspace. The ship's complement numbers 890 officers and enlisted men, far too many for the available berthing spaces. Sailors sleep in bunks stacked 4 high with 18 inches between levels. Shower facilities are primitive. The galley can barely feed everyone in shifts. Ventilation is inadequate throughout the ship. In the North Atlantic's cold weather, condensation drips from overhead pipes, soaking bedding and clothing. In warmer southern latitudes, the hangar deck becomes a sweltering oven where temperatures routinely exceed 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Aviation gasoline fumes permeate everything, despite ventilation blowers running constantly. The ship's rolling characteristics are legendary in the worst possible way. The Bogue-class carriers have high topside weight, the flight deck, island superstructure, and aircraft, sitting atop a narrow beam. This configuration guarantees violent rolling motion in any seaway above moderate. Rolls of 35 to 40 degrees are routine in North Atlantic storms. 50-degree rolls occur often enough that deck crews secure everything with multiple tie-downs and safety chains. Aircraft break loose anyway. On one particularly violent passage, an Avenger torpedo bomber breaks free from its tie-downs during a 50-degree roll. The 4-ton aircraft slides across the hangar deck, smashes into a Wildcat fighter, demolishes both planes, and injures 3 mechanics. The wreckage takes 2 days to clear and costs the Navy over $300,000 in destroyed aircraft. Sailors develop a dark gallows humor about their ship's stability. The Bogue-class carriers can roll either way, they joke. Port or starboard, take your pick. Neither option is comfortable, but at least you get variety. More seriously, the violent motion makes aircraft operations extraordinarily dangerous. Landing on a carrier is always challenging. Landing on a carrier that's rolling 40 degrees, with the deck rising and falling 30 feet between peak and trough, while the ship also yaws and pitches, requires skill bordering on the suicidal. Pilots must time their approach to catch the arresting wire at the exact moment the deck is level. Miss the timing by 2 seconds, and the deck could be angled 30 degrees, guaranteeing a crash. The arresting gear consists of 9 wires stretched across the aft flight deck. Hydraulic mechanisms beneath the deck absorb the aircraft's kinetic energy when the tailhook catches a wire. 3 crash barriers provide backup if an aircraft misses all 9 wires. In theory, the system is redundant and reliable. In practice, wires break, hydraulics fail, barriers malfunction. When mechanical systems fail during landing operations, aircraft crash into the barriers, into other aircraft parked forward of the arresting area, or worse, over the side into the ocean. The casualty rates are classified, but flight crews aboard Bogue understand that landing accidents kill more aviators than enemy action during the escort carrier's first 6 months of operations. Captain Short addresses the problem with relentless training. He drills his pilots endlessly on approach procedures. He insists on multiple wave-offs if conditions aren't perfect. He authorizes pilots to divert to shore bases rather than attempt landings in extremely heavy seas. The training reduces casualties but cannot eliminate them. Flying from an escort carrier in the North Atlantic remains one of the most dangerous jobs in the United States Navy. Bogue departed Norfolk on January 5, 1943, on her first anti-submarine patrol. Task Group 21.12 consists of Bogue and 4 destroyer escorts. The destroyers are themselves new construction, barely tested, equipped with the latest sonar and radar but crewed by sailors who've never hunted submarines before. The entire group is an experiment. Command assigns them a patrol sector in the Central Atlantic, deliberately positioned to intercept U-boats transiting to and from their operational areas near the convoy routes. Intelligence reports indicate multiple submarines in the area. Ultra-intercepts of German naval communications have revealed approximate U-boat positions and patrol zones. But the approximation is not precise. The ocean is vast, submarines are small, and finding them requires skill, patience, and substantial luck. For 3 weeks, Bogue's aircraft found nothing. They fly patrol sectors radiating out from the carrier, square searches, expanding square searches, barrier patrols along suspected transit routes. They investigate radar contacts that turn out to be whales. They depth charge sonar, contacts that turn out to be temperature layers. They return to the carrier with no results beyond mounting frustration and dwindling aviation fuel stocks. The aircraft themselves are barely adequate for anti-submarine work. Grumman F-4F Wildcat fighters provide air defense against German long-range patrol bombers. 4 50-caliber machine guns, and not much else. They're fast enough at 318 miles per hour to catch Focke-Wulf condors, but their combat radius of barely 500 miles limits their effectiveness. The Wildcats can strafe surfaced submarines, but their machine gun fire rarely inflicts serious damage on pressure hulls designed to withstand depth charge explosions. Grumman TBF Avenger torpedo bombers carry the real anti-submarine firepower. Each Avenger can carry 4 depth charges or up to 2,000 pounds of other munitions. The depth charges are Mark 47s, 300 pounds of Torpex explosive in a streamlined casing. When dropped from low altitude and set to detonate at specific depths, they can crack a submarine's pressure hull if they explode within 20 feet of the target. Can is the operative word. Finding a submerged submarine is difficult. Tracking it long enough to position for an attack run is harder. Dropping depth charges accurately from an aircraft travelling at 200 knots while the submarine takes evasive action verges on impossible. During Bogue's first patrol, her Avenger crews drop over 50 depth charges on suspected submarine contacts. Not one produces confirmed results. They return to Norfolk in early February, having expended enormous quantities of fuel and ammunition without sinking a single U-boat. Captain Short's after-action report is blunt. Anti-submarine operations from escort carriers require better tactics, better weapons, and better intelligence about enemy positions. The current approach, random searches across vast ocean expanses, wastes resources without producing results. Admiral King reads the report and does something unexpected. Instead of relieving Short for failing to sink submarines, King orders him to continue operations. The Navy needs to learn how to make escort carriers effective, and learning requires operational experience even when that experience includes failure. Bogue's second patrol in March proves equally fruitless. Her third patrol in early April produces one possible submarine contact, but the Avenger's depth charges malfunction and fail to detonate. The U-boat escapes. The crew's morale deteriorates. Flying dangerous missions without results grinds down confidence. Pilots begin questioning whether the entire escort carrier concept is fundamentally flawed. Shore-based patrol bombers from Newfoundland and Iceland occasionally sink U-boats. Why can't carrier-based aircraft achieve similar results? The answer emerges slowly through analysis of patrol patterns and attack procedures. Shore-based aircraft benefit from precise intelligence about U-boat positions. Radio direction finding stations triangulate submarine transmissions. Coastal radar tracks surfaced U-boats near shore. Ultra-intelligence provides advance warning when submarines report their positions to headquarters. Shore-based bombers fly directly to known submarine locations and attack. Bogue's aircraft, in contrast, search blindly across hundreds of square miles, hoping to stumble across a surfaced U-boat through random chance. The odds are terrible, and the results reflect those odds. The solution requires integrating escort carrier operations with the intelligence apparatus that supports shore-based anti-submarine forces. In April 1943, the Navy established the 10th Fleet specifically to coordinate anti-submarine warfare across all platforms and commands. The 10th Fleet doesn't operate ships. It coordinates intelligence, assigns patrol sectors, vector ships and aircraft toward known or suspected submarine concentrations. Admiral Francis Lowe becomes 10th Fleet's Chief of Staff. He immediately recognizes that escort carriers represent a potential force multiplier if properly employed. But properly employed means fundamentally changing how hunter-killer groups operate. Lowe convinces Admiral King to give Bogue's task group access to ultra-intelligence. Not complete access, security concerns prohibit that, but enough to position the carrier in areas where U-boats are likely to be operating. Bogue departed Norfolk on April 22, 1943, for her 4th patrol. This time, the 10th Fleet provides specific intelligence. Multiple U-boats are operating in a sector west of the Azores. They're attacking convoys, then withdrawing to the south to avoid Allied air patrols from Iceland. Bogue's task group positions itself along the probable withdrawal route. For 6 days, the aircraft found nothing. Then, on the morning of May 22nd, Lieutenant Junior Grade William Chamberlain, flying Avenger, T-11 spots a surfaced submarine approximately 800 miles east of Newfoundland. U-569 is running on the surface, diesel engines charging her batteries after a night spent submerged. Captain Lieutenant Hans-Peter Hinch commands the boat. He's 31 years old, veteran of multiple patrols, confident in his understanding of Allied capabilities. His lookouts scan the horizon continuously, watching for aircraft. But the visibility this morning is poor, broken clouds at 2,000 feet, intermittent rain squalls. The conditions favor the hunter, not the hunted. Chamberlain spots the submarine from 4 miles out, a dark silhouette against grey water. He doesn't radio the contact immediately. Standard procedure dictates maintaining surprise as long as possible. He climbs into the cloud layer, using the cover to approach undetected. His bombardier, Aviation Radioman 2nd Class Leonard Harmon, arms the 4 Mark 47 depth charges suspended beneath the wings. At 1 mile distance, Chamberlain pushes the Avenger into a shallow dive, accelerating to attack speed. He breaks through the clouds at 800 feet altitude, the submarine directly ahead, still unaware. The lookouts finally see him at 400 yards. Too late. Hinch orders an emergency dive. The bow starts tilting downward. The conning tower hatch slams shut, but U-569 needs 30 seconds to submerge completely, and Chamberlain's attack run takes 12 seconds. The Avenger roars over the submarine at 200 feet altitude. Harmon toggles the release switches. 4 depth charges tumble from their racks, splashing into the water in a diamond pattern around the diving submarine. They're set to detonate at 25 feet depth, the standard setting for attacking submarines that have just begun diving. The explosions erupt simultaneously, 4 massive geysers of white water shooting 50 feet into the air. The shock waves converge on U-569's pressure hull. Inside the submarine, men are thrown against bulkheads. Electrical panels spark and short-circuit. The lights go out. Emergency lighting flickers on, revealing chaos. Water sprays from a dozen ruptured pipes and valve seals. Hinch orders maximum dive, trying to reach safety in the deep Atlantic. But the damage is catastrophic. The stern planes are jammed. The diving angle is too steep, approaching 40 degrees. Tools, loose equipment, anything not secured slides forward with thunderous crashes. In the engine room, a diesel engine breaks free from its mounts, a 5-ton piece of machinery now tumbling through the compartment. The depth gauge spins past 100 meters, 150, 200. At 230 meters, approaching the boat's crushed depth, Hinch realizes he has no choice. Surface or die. He orders all ballast tanks blown. U-569 shoots toward the surface like a cork released underwater. She breaks through at an impossible angle, bow pointing skyward, propellers thrashing uselessly in the air. Chamberlain is still overhead, circling, calling in additional aircraft. Within minutes, another Avenger arrives, piloted by Lieutenant Junior Grade Stuart Doty. Both aircraft strafe the stricken submarine with 50 caliber machine guns. Hinch knows the end has come. He orders an abandoned ship and scuttling charges set. The crew pours out of the conning tower hatch, jumping into the 40-degree water. They're wearing life jackets, but no survival suits. In water this cold, they have perhaps 90 minutes before hypothermia becomes fatal. The Canadian destroyer HMCS Street Laurent, racing toward the position at maximum speed, rescues 24 survivors. The rest, including Hinch, go down with their boat. U-569 is the first submarine killed by aircraft from USS Bogue, but she won't be the last. The tactics that produced this kill, intelligence-guided positioning combined with relentless air patrols, will be refined and repeated across the Atlantic for the next 2 years. Captain Short's after-action report following this patrol is dramatically different from his previous submissions. For the first time, he reports that the hunter-killer concept works when properly supported by intelligence. The key is positioning the carrier where submarines are likely to be, not randomly searching empty ocean. Give us targets, and we'll sink them. The 10th Fleet takes the lesson to heart. By June 1943, all Atlantic escort carriers received detailed intelligence summaries before each patrol. Not specific submarine positions, security concerns still prohibit revealing how much ultra-intelligence provides, but general areas where U-boat concentrations are highest. Bogue departed Norfolk on her 5th patrol in late May. Her aircraft sank U-217 on June 5th and U-118 on June 12th, 2 submarines in 8 days. The transformation from ineffectiveness to lethality happens almost overnight. The difference isn't better aircraft or improved weapons. The difference is intelligence placing the carrier where targets exist. The tactics evolve rapidly through operational experience. Aircraft conduct expanding square searches from the carrier's position. Each aircraft covers a sector radiating outward from the task group, flying precise navigation patterns that ensure complete coverage without gaps. When one aircraft detects a submarine, it immediately calls in others. Multiple aircraft attack simultaneously from different directions, preventing the submarine from evading toward empty sky. The Mark 47 depth charge proves devastatingly effective when dropped accurately. 300 pounds of Torpex explosive detonating within 20 feet of a submarine's pressure hull will crack welds, spring hatches, flood compartments. Even near misses cause sufficient damage to force submarines to abort patrols and return to base. A damaged submarine withdrawing from the patrol area is almost as good as a sunk submarine. It removes a threat from the convoy routes. The destroyer escorts screening the carrier prosecute any submarine that dives before aircraft can attack. The DEs carry the latest sonar equipment and hedgehog mortars. They can track submerged contacts with unprecedented accuracy and deliver attacks while maintaining sonar contact. The combination of air and surface forces creates a layered defense that submarines cannot penetrate. German submarine commanders begin reporting disturbing patterns in their radio messages to headquarters. American escort carriers appear to know where U-boats are operating. Destroyers vector towards submarine positions with suspicious accuracy. The Germans investigate whether their codes are compromised. They never fully realize that ultra-intelligence is reading their naval communications in real time, but they understand something fundamental has changed. The Atlantic is no longer safe for submarines. Admiral Donitz responds by changing tactics. U-boats receive orders to remain submerged during daylight hours, surfacing only at night to recharge batteries. This reduces their vulnerability to air attack, but also reduces their operational effectiveness. A submarine that must remain submerged during daylight cannot maintain contact with convoys, cannot maneuver into attack positions, cannot effectively hunt. The U-boats are no longer predators. They're prey, and they know it. The psychological impact on submarine crews is devastating. Sailors sign up for submarine service expecting to be hunters. Instead, they spend weeks submerged in cramped, stinking steel tubes, constantly afraid, knowing that any moment might bring the sound of aircraft engines overhead or the distinctive ping of active sonar. The casualty rates are terrible. In May 1943, Dönitz lost 43 U-boats. In June, 17 more. In July, 37. The losses exceed replacement rates. The German submarine fleet is being ground down through attrition that it cannot sustain, and escort carriers are contributing significantly to those losses. USS Card, CVE-11, joins the Atlantic Hunter-Killer Force in June 1943. Under Captain Arnold Isbell, Card's task group sank 8 submarines between July and October. USS Core, CVE-13, commanded by Captain Marshall Greer, adds 6 more kills during the same period. USS Croatan, CVE-25, arrives in August and begins her own tally. The escort carriers develop distinctive operating procedures that maximize their effectiveness. They patrol in designated sectors, typically 500 to 800 miles square, positioned astride known U-boat transit routes. The aircraft fly continuous patrols from before dawn until after dusk. Each patrol consists of 2 or 3 aircraft flying coordinated search patterns. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The Grumman, Avenger torpedo bomber, became the workhorse of anti-submarine operations. The TBF, as it's designated, can carry 4 depth charges or up to 2,000 pounds of other ordnance. Its combat radius of 500 miles means it can patrol far from the carrier, extending the protective umbrella across vast ocean expanses. The aircraft has endurance of over 4 hours, allowing lengthy searches before returning for fuel. The Wildcat fighters provide air defense against German long-range patrol bombers, but they also prove useful for submarine attacks. Their 450 caliber machine guns can strafe surfaced U-boats, killing exposed crew members, damaging deck guns, destroying periscopes and radar antennas. The Wildcats work in coordination with Avengers, strafing to suppress anti-aircraft fire while the Avengers position for depth charge runs. By autumn 1943, the escort carrier groups had developed a thoroughly professional approach to submarine hunting. The crews understand their aircraft's capabilities and limitations. They know how to search effectively, how to attack accurately, how to coordinate multiple aircraft for maximum effect. They've learned through experience what works and what doesn't. The technical improvements continue throughout the year. New depth charges with improved aerodynamics fall more accurately. Better fusing mechanisms ensure reliable detonation at precise depths. Enhanced explosives deliver more destructive power per pound of weight. Each incremental improvement makes the weapons slightly more lethal. The Germans attempt countermeasures. U-boats receive upgraded anti-aircraft armament. Instead of a single 20mm cannon, boats now carry quad-mounted 20mm guns and 37mm automatic cannon. Some commanders receive orders to remain surfaced when attacked by aircraft, fighting it out with gunfire rather than diving. This proves catastrophic. Aircraft attacking from different directions overwhelm the submarine's defensive fire. The U-boat becomes a stationary target while aircraft dive from multiple angles, immune to the anti-aircraft fire that can only engage one target at a time. Several submarines are destroyed this way, their commanders following orders that guarantee their deaths. By December 1943, the Germans abandoned the fight on the surface doctrine. U-boats revert to immediate crash dives when aircraft appear, but this creates its own problems. A submarine caught on the surface needs 30 seconds to submerge completely. An attacking aircraft traveling at 200 knots covers 1 mile in 18 seconds. The mathematics favor the attacker. The weather in the North Atlantic becomes both ally and enemy to the escort carriers. Winter storms with 60-foot waves and 100-mile-per-hour winds make flight operations impossible. The carriers pitch and roll so violently that aircraft cannot land safely. Several carriers lose, aircraft blown overboard by wind gusts. Pilots attempting landings in extreme weather crash into barriers or slide off the deck into the ocean. But the same weather that grounds carrier aircraft also forces U-boats to remain submerged. Submarines cannot safely surface in 60-foot seas. The waves will wash over the conning tower, flooding through any open hatch, swamping the boat. So both sides hunker down during the worst storms, waiting for conditions to improve. The spring of 1944 brings tactical innovations that further increase escort carrier effectiveness. The introduction of the Mark 24 mine, nicknamed Fido, revolutionizes anti-submarine warfare. Fido is actually an acoustic homing torpedo, designed to be dropped from aircraft. Once in the water, it searches for submarine propeller noise and homes in on the sound. Fido's existence remains one of the war's most closely guarded secrets. Aircrew call it mine instead of torpedo to confuse any submarine. Survivors who might be captured and interrogated. The weapon's acoustic homing capability would reveal too much about Allied technical capabilities if Germans learned the truth. The first Fido kill occurred in May 1944 when aircraft from USS Croatan sank U-853. The submarine's captain never understands what attacked his boat. One moment they're evading depth charges, the next a massive explosion tears through the engine room. Unknown to him, an acoustic torpedo tracked his propeller noise through 3 miles of ocean and detonated directly beneath his keel. Fido's psychological impact on surviving U-boat crews is devastating. Submariners develop paranoia about making any noise that might attract acoustic weapons. They run at minimum speed when evading. They shut down unnecessary equipment. They whisper even though sound transmission through the hull makes internal conversation irrelevant to external detection. The fear becomes as destructive as the weapons themselves. USS Guadalcanal, CVE 60, represents the pinnacle of escort carrier anti-submarine operations. Commissioned in September 1943, she's commanded by Captain Daniel Gallery, an innovative officer who refuses to accept that destroying U-boats is the only possible outcome of submarine encounters. Gallery watches U-515 sink after his task group's attack in April 1944. Code books, cipher machines, intelligence materials, all vanishing into the Atlantic depths. He realizes that capturing a submarine intact would provide intelligence worth more than a dozen sinkings. His superiors think the idea is insane. Submarines carry scuttling charges. Any boarding party would be entering a death trap. Gallery ignores the skeptics and begins training specialized boarding teams. On June 4, 1944, Guadalcanal's task group encountered U-505. The submarine is badly damaged by depth charges and forced to surface. Gallery orders his boarding parties away before. The submarine sinks. What happens next is described in detail elsewhere. But the key point is that escort carriers have evolved beyond simple submarine destruction. They're now capable of the most sophisticated anti-submarine operations imaginable. The final statistics tell a story that contradicts every pre-war assumption about naval warfare. Between May 1943 and May 1945, 11 American escort carriers operating in the Atlantic sink or captured 54 German U-boats. Their aircraft account for 31 of those kills. The remaining 23 are sunk by destroyer escorts working in coordination with the carriers. 54 submarines. To put that number in perspective, the entire United States Navy's force of fleet carriers, cruisers, and destroyers in the Atlantic combined sank fewer U-boats than the escort carriers alone. The ugly boats, the combustible, vulnerable, expendable vessels that nobody wanted, achieve a kill rate that exceeds all other platforms. The British and Canadian escort carriers add their own impressive tallies. HMS Biter, Tracker, and Activity operate in the North Atlantic and Arctic convoys, sinking multiple U-boats and protecting countless merchant ships. The Royal Navy's approach differs slightly from American tactics. British carriers typically stay with convoys rather than operating as independent hunter-killers. But the results are equally effective. The escort carrier's success stems from a simple but powerful advantage. They put aircraft where submarines operate. Land-based patrol bombers must fly hundreds of miles to reach their patrol sectors, limiting their time on station. Escort carrier aircraft launch from the middle of their patrol area. They can search for hours before returning to refuel and rearm. Economic mathematics is equally compelling. Building an escort carrier costs approximately $1.5 million. Training a flight squadron costs perhaps another $500,000. Operating the carrier and its escorts for 2 years of wartime service costs maybe $10 million total. The 11 Atlantic escort carriers therefore represent a total investment of roughly $110 million. Those carriers sink or capture 54 submarines. Each Type 7 U-boat costs approximately 2 million Reichsmarks to build, equivalent to $800,000. The submarines carry crews of 44 to 50 men, each representing 2 years of training. The total German investment in the 54 lost submarines exceeds $100 million in material costs alone, not counting the trained crews and the cargo they would have destroyed. The escort carriers achieve positive return on investment measured purely in economic terms, but their real value transcends economics. Every merchant ship that reaches Britain safely carries food, fuel, ammunition, weapons, and vehicles. Every convoy that crosses the Atlantic without loss sustains British resistance and builds American military power in England for the eventual invasion of Europe. The Battle of the Atlantic turns decisively in the Allies' favour during May 1943. Multiple factors contribute to that turning point: better intelligence from ultra-decrypts, more escort vessels, improved weapons, the closing of the mid-Atlantic air gap through long-range patrol bombers. But escort carriers represent perhaps the single most important innovation because they solve the fundamental problem of projecting air power across oceanic distances. The Type 7 U-boat was designed to operate in the Atlantic beyond the range of shore-based aircraft. That was a valid assumption in 1939. By 1944, the assumption no longer holds. Aircraft carriers, even small, ugly, inadequate ones, can operate anywhere. Merchant ships operate. The sanctuary in the middle of the Atlantic disappears. German submarine doctrine never fully adapts to this new reality. Dönitz continues believing that technical improvements, better torpedoes, faster submarines, will restore the balance. He never grasps that the fundamental strategic equation has changed. Surface vessels with aircraft have inherent advantages over submarines in the open ocean. The submarine must surface eventually. The carrier never submerges. The human cost of this transformation is calculated in different currencies for each side. For the Allies, the escort carriers represent a relatively cheap victory. The 11 Atlantic escort carriers lose fewer than 200 men killed during submarine operations. Most casualties result from operational accidents, not enemy action. Only one escort carrier, USS Block Island, was sunk by a U-boat during Atlantic operations on May 29, 1944. Even then, most of her crew survives. For the Germans, the cost is catastrophic. Of the 54 U-boats sunk by American escort carriers and their escorts, approximately 2,400 German submariners died. Another 400 are captured. The casualty rate approaches 90%. These aren't just numbers. They're trained sailors, many with families, some with years of experience, all sacrificed to a campaign that by 1944, everyone except Dönitz understands is lost. The technical lessons from escort carrier operations influence naval aviation for decades. The concept of small carriers operating with specialized aircraft proves that fleet carriers aren't the only viable platform for naval aviation. During the Cold War, the United States built the Iwo Jima class and later the Tarawa class amphibious assault ships, which are essentially updated escort carriers designed to operate helicopters and vertical takeoff aircraft. The British developed the Invincible class light carriers, which use ski jump ramps to launch Harrier jump jets. The concept is a pure escort carrier, a small platform optimized for a specific mission rather than a fleet carrier attempting to do everything. The Falklands War in 1982 demonstrates that small carriers with the right aircraft can dominate operations in confined maritime theatres. The anti-submarine tactics pioneered by World War II escort carriers evolved into modern carrier strike group defensive doctrine. Today's Nimitz and Ford-class supercarriers operate with escort ships, providing layered defense. Helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft patrol vast areas searching for submarines. The sensors are more sophisticated, using magnetic anomaly detection, sonar buoys, and dipping sonar. But the fundamental concept remains unchanged. Aircraft extend the defensive perimeter far beyond surface ships' detection range. The escort carriers themselves mostly disappeared after World War II. The Bogue-class ships are too small, too slow, too lightly built for post-war service. Most are scrapped or converted to merchant use. A few served in supporting roles during the Korean War, but by the mid-1950s, nearly all had retired. USS Bogue herself survives until 1946. She received a Presidential Unit Citation and 3 battle stars for wartime service. Her aircraft and escorts sank 10 German and 2 Japanese submarines, a record exceeded by only a few escort carriers. After decommissioning, she sold for scrap in 1960. No museum preserves her, no memorial marks her service. She vanishes as completely as the U-boats she helped destroy. But the concept she represented lives on. The idea that you don't need perfect warships to win wars. That good enough, produced in quantity, delivered when needed, can triumph over technically superior but numerically inadequate opponents. That innovation in tactics and doctrine matters more than innovation in hardware. The escort carriers were ugly boats. Everyone who served aboard them acknowledged that truth. They rolled violently in moderate seas and dangerously in heavy weather. They were slow, lightly armed, vulnerable to damage. Their habitability was terrible. Their flight decks were too short. Their hangars are too cramped. By every measure of traditional naval architecture, they were inadequate. But they worked. They put aircraft over convoys when convoys needed air cover. They hunted submarines where submarines thought they were safe. They transformed the Atlantic from a German lake into an Allied highway. They made possible the massive build-up of forces in Britain that culminated in the Normandy invasion. The destroyer and cruiser captains who looked down on escort carriers as inferior vessels were wrong. Not wrong about the carrier's technical limitations. Those were real and significant. Wrong about what matters in naval warfare. Presence matters more than perfection. Being there with adequate weapons matters more than being perfect somewhere else. The escort carriers were there, in the North Atlantic, every day, in all weather, hunting submarines. The ugly boat that nobody wanted became the weapon that won the tonnage war. The combustible, vulnerable, expendable carrier that sailors mocked proved more effective than beautiful, powerful, expensive alternatives. Sometimes, winning isn't about having the best equipment. Sometimes, winning is about having adequate equipment in the right place at the right time, with the right tactics and the determination to use it effectively. That's the real lesson of the escort carriers. Admiral King didn't want them. Secretary Knox argued against them. Traditional naval officers dismissed them as inferior substitutes for real carriers. President Roosevelt overruled everyone and ordered them built anyway because Britain was starving and desperate measures were required. The carriers weren't perfect, but perfect wasn't available. Perfect took 3 years to build and cost $70 million and was desperately needed in the Pacific. Good enough took 6 months to build, cost $1.5 million, and could be deployed to the Atlantic immediately. In war, good enough right now beats perfect eventually. The escort carriers proved that fundamental truth through 24 months of brutal North Atlantic operations. They put aircraft over the black hole, where shore-based bombers couldn't reach. They hunted submarines in weather that would have grounded land-based aircraft. They provided the one capability the Germans couldn't counter: persistent air presence in the middle of the ocean. 54 submarines were sunk or captured, countless convoys protected, thousands of merchant ships delivered safely, millions of tons of cargo reaching Britain. The math is simple and devastating. The ugly boats won the Battle of the Atlantic as surely as any fleet carrier won battles in the Pacific. And they did it while rolling 40 degrees, pitching in 60-foot seas, operating aircraft from flight decks that would have been rejected as inadequate for peacetime. Training. They did it with crews who slept 4 to a bunk and showered in salt water and ate food that would have violated health codes in civilian life. They did it despite being mocked, dismissed, and designated expendable. The escort carriers weren't pretty. They weren't impressive. They weren't the kind of warships that inspire paintings or monuments. But they were exactly what the Atlantic Fleet needed in 1943 when U-boats were winning and Britain was starving and nobody else had a solution. Sometimes the ugly boat is the right boat. Sometimes being there is more important than being perfect. Sometimes the weapon everyone dismisses as inadequate turns out to be the weapon that wins the war. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.